Why did Britain and the Soviet Union invade Iran with the Nazis at the gates of Moscow? Soviet and British troops met for the first time not in Wismar in May 45, as most people believe. In 1941, the Allied countries jointly invaded and divided Iran. In the catastrophic summer of 1941, the Wehrmacht occupied most of the Baltic region. Byelorussia, half of Ukraine, came close to Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and was approaching Moscow. Surprisingly, given the great threat to Russia, Soviet leaders decided to open a new front thousands of miles from Europe against Iran. Iran caused much concern among the Allies. Despite its proclaimed neutrality, it adopted strong pro-German positions. The Third Reich had a colossal influence over Iranian politics and economics, and a large German intelligence operation was active in the country. All British and Soviet entreaties to expel numerous German citizens were refused by the Iranian leader, Reza Shah Pahlavi. Such a situation was unacceptable, particularly because an important Lend-Lease route crossed Iranian territory via the so-called Persian Corridor, to exclude any chance that Iran may assist or even join the Axis war effort. The Allies agreed to take the country under their own control until the end of the war. On August 25, 1941, Soviet and British troops launched a joint invasion of the country, dubbed Operation Countenance.
The year is 1941. The world is tearing itself apart. From the frozen steppes of Russia to the deserts of North Africa, the Second World War rages, consuming nations and empires. Yet, in the heart of the Middle East, one nation strives to remain an island of calm in a sea of chaos. On the morning of August 25, 1941, a neutral nation, at peace with the world, is suddenly invaded from the north and the south. A meticulously planned, two-pronged assault pierces its borders without warning, a stunning violation of its sovereignty. The aggressors are not the Axis powers, whose conquests have redrawn the map of Europe. The attack comes from an unexpected quarter, not by the Axis, but by the Allies. This is the story of Operation Countenance, the invasion of Iran. A chapter of the Second World War often relegated to a footnote, yet one whose consequences were anything but minor. It was an operation born of desperation, a ruthless act of realpolitik that would secure a vital lifeline for the Allied cause. An invasion so crucial, it may have saved the world and doomed a king. To understand why, we must look to the desperate summer of 1941. 2 months earlier, Hitler had launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history, aimed at the heart of the Soviet Union. By August, the situation was dire. The Wehrmacht seemed unstoppable. By the summer of 1941, Hitler's armies pressed toward Moscow. The Allies were desperate. The Soviet Union, now a reluctant partner in the fight against Nazism, was on the verge of collapse. A Soviet defeat would free up millions of German soldiers to fight on other fronts, a catastrophic scenario for Great Britain, which stood nearly alone. Supplying the Soviets was paramount, but the routes were treacherous. The Arctic convoys were a death trap of U-boats and Luftwaffe attacks. The Pacific route was long and vulnerable to the Japanese. Churchill and Stalin scoured the globe for another option, a third way. And there, on the map, one country stood at the center of everything: Iran. Geographically, it was the perfect land bridge, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Soviet border. But politically, it was a minefield. Iran, or Persia as it was still widely known, was fiercely independent. Its neutrality was a cornerstone of its national policy. But in the brutal calculus of total war, its neutrality was a luxury the world could no longer afford. At the nation's helm was Reza Shah Pahlavi, a former army officer who had seized power in a 1921 coup. He was an autocrat with a grand vision. He had spent 2 decades dragging his country into the 20th century, building infrastructure, reforming the government, and forging a new national identity. Reza Shah modernized but distrusted Britain and the Soviets. He saw them as imperialist powers who had carved up his country for centuries. His distrust was well-founded in a long and bitter history of foreign interference. Seeking a third path, a partner without a history of imperialism in the region, Reza Shah had turned to Germany. Throughout the 1930s, economic and diplomatic ties flourished. Germany became Iran's top trading partner. He allowed hundreds of German technicians, a counterbalance in a great power struggle. These were engineers, advisors, and businessmen, crucial to his modernization projects. But to the Allies, their presence was a Trojan horse. London and Moscow presented Tehran with demands: expel the German nationals. Reza Shah stalled, viewing it as an infringement on his sovereignty. But the Allies saw a ticking clock. They feared the Germans were spies and saboteurs who could incite a pro-Axis coup, or worse, pave the way for a German advance through the Caucasus. For Churchill and Stalin, a Nazi-leaning Iran risked oil, the Caucasus, and British India. The nightmare scenario was a German pincer movement linking up with their forces in Russia and seizing the entire Middle East. The invasion plan, Operation Countenance, had two primary non-negotiable goals. Objective 1, secure Abadan, the lifeblood of the British war effort in Asia. Located in the south, the Anglo-Iranian oil company's refinery at Abadan was the largest in the world. Its fuel powered the Royal Navy and the British armies from Egypt to Singapore. Losing it was unthinkable. Objective 2, seize the Trans-Iranian Railway, an engineering marvel. This was Reza Shah's crowning achievement, a 1,400-kilometer line stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Caspian Sea. It had been built entirely with Iranian capital to avoid foreign debt and influence. Ironically, the very symbol of his independence was now the primary reason he would lose it. For the Allies, this railway was the key. It was...
Heard enough, right? Yeah, so this whole axis of evil thing, it turned out it was a great big lie. Great big freaking lie. And think about all those men who signed up to go fight for their country and died. Terrible death. Far from home. For these lying bastards. But let's keep going. There's a lot more to cover. The Soviet Union found a legal reason for the invasion and didn't declare war on Iran. It referred to the 1921 Russo-Persian Treaty, where it was said, if a third party should desire to use Persian territory as a base of operations against Russia, Russia shall have the right to advance her troops into the Persian interior for the purpose of carrying out the military operations necessary for its defense. The unexpected Soviet and British invasion with air landing parties in the enemy rear and the absolute dominance of Allied aviation in the skies left few chances for the outnumbered Iranian army. Trying to resist in first days, Iranians soon switched to chaotic flight and surrender en masse. Seeing its army suffering defeats on all fronts, Iran's leadership ordered its troops to lay down arms on 29th of August. The next day, British and Soviet troops met at Sanandaj. On 31st of August, they shook hands in Kazvin, just 100 miles from Tehran. On September 15th, Allied troops entered Tehran, where they held a joint military parade. The whole campaign cost Soviets 40 and British 22 dead. The Iranians lost over 800 troops, and 200 civilians were killed during Allied bombings of Iranian cities. So that's a war crime, the Soviets and the British. Soviet troops occupied the northern part of the country and the British its southern and southwestern parts, and Iran got a new leader. Reza Shah Pahlavi abdicated in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, under whose guidance the country declared war on Germany. This allowed the smooth functioning of the Persian corridor and later the hosting of the Conference of Allied Leaders in Tehran in 1943. The Red Army man talks to a soldier of the Iranian army, which laid down arms. It was decided that the Allies would leave Iran 6 months after the war's end, and while Great Britain evacuated its troops in time, the Soviets weren't in such a hurry. Stalin organized the creation of several puppet states, the People's Republic of Azerbaijan and the Kurdish Republic of Mahaban in northern Iran with the intention of later annexing them. This move provoked a massive diplomatic backlash from the West and the United Nations, which finally forced the Soviet Union to fall back and abandoned the puppet states to their fate. Soon the Iranian army regained control over the country's northern territories. So Iran is back in control of its nation. Truman against Stalin in Iran, a tale of three messages. But when history says that my terms of office saw the beginning of the Cold War, it will also say that in those 8 years we have set the course that can win it. The first crisis came in 1945 and 1946 when the Soviet Union refused to honor its agreement to remove its troops from Iran. Members of my cabinet came to me and asked if we were ready to take the risk that a firm stand involved. I replied we were, so we took our stand. We made it clear to the Soviet Union that we expected them to honor their agreement, and the Soviet troops were withdrawn. With these words, Harry S. Truman celebrated the triumph of containment in his farewell address and claimed a personal victory in forcing the Red Army out of Iran. The manner by which Truman influenced Stalin's decision, however, has been the subject of considerable debate. The origins of the controversy date back to the statements made by Truman during a press conference on April 24, 1952. The president told the reporters that he had to send an ultimatum to the head of the Soviet Union to get out of Persia, and the Soviets complied because the U.S. was in a position to meet a situation of that kind. Well, what had we done in the 40s? What did Truman, specifically, what did Truman do in the 40s, in the late 40s? He dropped the nuke. Later on the same day, a White House spokesman explained the president was using the term ultimatum in a non-technical layman's sense and that the president was referring to the United States leadership in the UN, particularly in the Security Council, and through diplomatic channels in the spring of 1946, which was the major factor in bringing about Soviet withdrawal from Iran. Despite this clarification, and despite the fact that Truman's remark during the press conference remained the only public statement in which the term ultimatum was mentioned, it became intimately associated with Truman's stand against Stalin. Truman's fading memory in later years perpetuated more confusion by furnishing various accounts of what the message contained and how it was conveyed to Stalin. In his memoirs, Truman recorded that he told Secretary Burns to send a blunt message to Stalin. An article written by the former president in 1957 stated, "The Soviet Union persisted in its occupation until I personally saw to it that Stalin was informed that I had given orders to our military chiefs to prepare for the movement of our ground, sea, and air forces. Stalin then did what I knew he would do. He moved his troops out." The possibility of military action was reiterated by Truman during a question and answer session with students at Columbia University in 1959. On the basis of interviews with Harriman and Truman, historian Herbert Drux reported that the president communicated directly to Stalin the warning that he would move the fleet as far as the Persian Gulf. How 13 U.S. presidents have managed the Iran relationship. The U.S. and Iran over the past 7 decades have been friends, foes, and sometimes even frenemies. I want to go back as far back as we can. Okay. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 53 to 61. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and Dwight D. Eisenhower drive past cheering crowds in Tehran on their way to the Shah's Marble Palace on December 14th, 1959. I'd say things are good. Things are looking good, right? Friend, foe, or frenemy. This was the beginning of a long friendship between the U.S. and the Shah of Iran after the CIA helped with a coup. Okay, so we have to go back even further. Let's just read a couple paragraphs, then we'll go back a little bit more. What was going on? As the UK was being pushed out of the Middle East, the US was trying to assert its power in the region to stop the spread of quote-unquote communism after World War II. Power meant allies and oil. The existing democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh got in the way of that. He wanted to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which we know today as BP. Under Eisenhower, the CIA, along with the UK, helped plan a coup that would replace Mossadegh with someone the U.S. preferred. Okay, so it was under Eisenhower. Okay. So Eisenhower, is he the one to blame? Just kind of seemed like it was before him, but I guess it was during his presidency, his reign. Oh, what a sneaky little snook, huh? Of course they're going to give him a warm welcome. And the people, were they all brainwashed morons like we have over here today with the Forever MAGA? Hey, don't get me started on Democrats. Don't get me started on all the people who are going to continue to vote Democrat either. It's like, God bless them. God bless them. We got to keep praying for them. It's hard to accept the fact that they're one and the same. It really is. Well, not really, but you know what I'm saying. There's some serious hardcore brainwashing. So, should we read a little bit more, or do we now know what's going on? Eisenhower, huh? It involved discrediting him and restoring power to Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. The U.S. began supplying military aid to Iran as well as civilian nuclear technology as part of the Atoms for Peace program. My God. Oh my gosh. Stop it. Really? They just like put it right on out there. Right on out there. The idiocracy of a nation. It's so sad what happened to us. You can thank the Nazis. You know, that fluoride program, I think, was really successful. It still is. Still is. But that's just one. What's worth knowing? What's also worth knowing? The coup ignited distrust of the U.S. amongst the people of Iran. Israel formed a state in 1948. And then, oh, shit. Right. Because that's going on at the, that was, oh, gosh. And in these early stages, the U.S. and Israel alliance was not as strong. Yeah, I don't know about that, considering it was like the Zionists who armed them with the help of the American government. So I think that the alliance was very, very strong. Jeez, man, can't anybody report the truth? The Shah did not officially recognize Israel, but was one of the only leaders of a Muslim-majority country to accept its existence. Okay. Interesting. So that's the deal. So the U.S. and Israel did a regime change. In exchange, the Shah, kind of recognizes Israel, and you got an ally right smack dab in the Middle East. Well, guess what? That's not the case today, and Israel and U.S. are trying to get another regime change, right? And is it all about the oil? I'm sure they want that land. It's holy land. So, Netanyahu say to Israel and whoever's controlling both them and America, they want to expand. That's all. I mean, this is just another, old world war, right? It's just got a lot of derelicts in high places. So it's a freaking hot mess, right? Trump didn't appoint the most qualified and the most righteous people for the job. He appointed those who would not arrest him for his crimes. JFK, Iran remained a strong ally under JFK, so he went along with the plan. He's one of the top bloodlines. As one of the main world players in oil production, Iran formed the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, along with Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. Bam. Now, who owns OPEC? America, Israel? As soon as they get Iran. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries in 7 years? Makes more sense. It aimed to give those countries more control over their oil resources and maximize profits, as well as give stable supply and prices to foreign companies and countries. But the wealth didn't filter down to many of the Iranian people. Kennedy began a military alliance with Israel, but was an opponent of its nuclear program. But they were getting their weapons from us anyway, so it didn't matter what our experts say. Anti-American sentiment was on the rise in Iran because they saw the United States supporting a corrupt government and did not fit their lifestyle. Yeah, makes sense. Johnson. So, of course, he's going to be friends, right? Good buddies. Good buddies. They killed Kennedy. They got this freak in office. Iran was still a key ally, but the alliance between the U.S. and Israel was also becoming a threat to that. LBJ continued to lean into the relationship to maintain control in the Middle East and access to oil. The administration continued selling military equipment to the Shah. Iran had a relatively close relationship with Israel. It was a key oil supplier to Israel, and they shared intelligence around the time of the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. So you can see how important it is for Israel to control Iran again. However, Iran is believed to have put pressure on the U.S. to back UN Resolution 242, which demanded Israel retreat from the occupied territories it gained in 1967, including the Gaza Strip. All right? So Netanyahu is picking up wherever this freak at the time in Israel, who was in control of Israel at the time. Let's find out. Okay. Oh, gee whiz. Yikes, huh? I say one of them looks human. Let's see. Okay, Grandpa Monster. And this guy looks like he could be Himmler's son. Israeli Labor Party. He's Minister of Defense and Finance. What an asset. A good little asset, huh? Born in Russia? Kiev. There you go. And that's what Putin says. Kiev belongs to Russia. So it spawned some interesting human beings, apparently. So this is all making sense. You know, you got your good old boys in office over and over and over again. Then you get Nixon, and this is, Prescott Bush was pulling the strings, and they're good times with the Shah. Good times with the Shah. Yeah, what a good life he lived. Nixon is trying to keep two friends who have turned on each other. Nixon visited Iran in 1972. He was incredibly concerned about the global instability in the economy amidst a long and drawn-out war in Vietnam. The following year, another Arab-Israeli war, the Yom Kippur War, broke out when Egypt and Syria attacked Israel. Palestinians, now living as refugees in other countries, mobilized and started launching military strikes from Lebanon into Israel. Okay, they've been dealing with this synagogue of Satan in the Middle East for so long, and I can't believe that America is now part of the synagogue of Satan. Like, it's just so disgusting. Not just our president, our senators, our congressmen, they are just, our representatives are sick and twisted and bought and paid for, and they're corrupt, and we got to pray for them all, or else, man, we are just going to get deeper and deeper into trouble. At this time, the Israel and U.S. relationship grew tighter, but that came with consequences. Of course it did. Like, everybody wants them dead. And look at what they did to us already. OPEC sanctioned the U.S. and Israel with an oil embargo, causing an oil crisis. Nixon and his national security, and this is when the U.S. is like, all right, we need to control OPEC, right? Nixon and his national security advisor and Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, don't get me started, made a plan to strengthen Iran's military to keep its ally and protect oil supply. It sold Iran $15 billion worth of state-of-the-art conventional weapons, including fighter jets. So we armed Israel, and then we armed Iran. Wow, these people are retarded. Other things worth knowing. Nixon supported Iran's plan to build 23 nuclear reactors for domestic energy purposes. So what are we talking about today then? The Shah later hinted at wanting to build nuclear weapons. Well, of course, what our experts say. Iran participated in the oil embargo in 1973. The U.S. response wasn't to go in and remove the Shah. The U.S. response was to go in and say, okay, you cannot do that again. Also, here's some tanks. Iran historically has been treated as an equal, a key global player. Benjamin McQueen. Gerald Ford, 74 to 77. Things are tense, but amongst the leaders and the people in Iran. So the Iranian people have just about had enough of this psychopath, enough of U.S., enough of Israel, right? The Shah was no longer feeling like he was in an equal partnership with the U.S. Told you not to make a deal with Satan. Major arms sales continued to Iran, but there were failed negotiations around nuclear weapons. On the ground in Iran, hatred of the Shah and the U.S. was escalating. Opposition voices were becoming more vocal. Islamic scholar Ruhollah Khomeini, who had been exiled in France, started spreading the word of Islam on cassette tapes that were shared throughout Iran. So the U.S. spread Islam too around the world, by the way. Israel and U.S. did that. And they had help. U.S. officials were becoming increasingly frustrated at the Shah's role in keeping oil prices high as inflation back home drove America toward a recession. The U.S. secretly went behind the Shah's back and colluded with Saudi Arabia to force down oil prices. Okay? See how we operate? The opposition to the Shah is really coalescing, and the thing they're seeing is kind of an unquestioning U.S. support for someone they see as a puppet and the dictator of the U.S. Jimmy Carter, 77-81. Down with the Shah, the bloodsucker. Oh, we got vampire in office, huh? And what's this here? And this is who the people want to lead them? That looks like Slugworth next to him, too. But is this who the people chose? Scholar. Deport all Iranians. Okay. Why? There's a breakup. This is a turning point in the relationship, and from here, there was no going back. Well, at least openly, a revolution. Anger was rising amongst the Iranian population around the regime, the hoarding of wealth, its increasing move away from its culture and oppression. It sounds like what's happening in the U.S. right now. Yes, so psychopathy is not sustainable. And thank Israel. Where are we? 1979, Khomeini overthrew the Shah, becoming supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This was an end to the strong U.S.-Iran alliance. Ayatollah Khomeini called the U.S. the Great Satan, Israel the Little Satan, and the Soviet Union the Lesser Satan. The new Iranian regime, now an enemy, is equipped with a nuclear program and a military supplied by the U.S. In the months following the revolution, Iranian students stormed the U.S. embassy. They took 52 Americans hostage and held them for 444 days. Carter's failure to secure the hostages' release was seen as the main reason he lost the next election. Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, who had seized power in the 60s with the help of U.S. intelligence, invaded Iran, kicking off the Iraq-Iran war. You can always spot a regime that's scared by how repressive it gets, and he was getting very repressive. Those normal tools of control weren't working, and so it was deploying the Secret Service, arbitrary arrests, torture, mass imprisonment. Is that what we're going to start seeing here in the U.S. in 2026? Reagan's secret dealings with Iran. Reagan and Khomeini started out as enemies, but the threat of a bigger foe meant the U.S. began dealing with Iran in secret. It's the middle of the Cold War. After initially backing Iraq's invasion of Iran, Reagan administration officials began covertly selling weapons to Iran as part of what will become known as the Iran-Contra deal. They were worried about Iran reaching out to the Soviet Union for help to fight the war, and also used the deal to negotiate the release of U.S. hostages. The Iraq-Iran war ended after hundreds of thousands of people were killed on both sides. The U.S. Navy shot down an Iranian civilian plane heading to Tehran to Dubai, killing the 290 passengers and crew. The U.S. claimed it had incorrectly identified it as a fighter jet. Sounds like when Trump blew up the elementary school, the girls' elementary school, killing nearly 170 little girls on the very first day of this current Iran war. Doesn't it sound very much like that? I would say so. Sending a disgusting message. Reagan did not apologize but paid compensation to the families, and Iran won't even get that. Here's where it gets really messy. It's impossible to understand what was happening with the U.S. and Iran at this time without looking at what was happening more broadly in the region. So, tensions were building between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. Iran cemented its backing of the Palestinian fight against Israel. Israel, the U.S.'s closest ally in the region, invaded Lebanon. Reagan at the time is believed to have offended Israel's president by telling him the bombing of West Beirut was creating a Holocaust, and which it is. Like, Israel, they're the Nazis. Everywhere they go, there's a Holocaust. Right now, we just finished up the Holocaust in Gaza, and they're continuing their Holocaust in South Lebanon today, as well as the Holocaust that's going on in Iran and Iraq because of Israel and the United States. Israel was never our ally. Inside Lebanon, Iran is backing Hezbollah, keeping in mind that Iran is receiving weapons from the U.S. Hezbollah bombed a U.S. barracks in Lebanon. The U.S. did not retaliate because our leaders view us as expendable. The U.S. declares Iran a state sponsor of terrorism. The scandal involving secret U.S. arms deals with Iran made news. This is all satanic. I mean, that's why it falls apart in such wicked, horrifying ways. So, on the one hand, publicly the U.S. is saying Iran is the state of terror, the hostage situation, we cannot allow this. But in the background, the United States is actually continuing its support with weapons. One thing that really impacted Iran at this time was the fact that its army was built by the U.S. and now it was openly hostile to the U.S. It was fighting a war with an army that was carrying U.S.-made stuff. And this just keeps going on and on. That's what these disgusting degenerates in office do. Bush trafficked drugs, weapons, humans, children. Okay? Bush did it. The Clintons. Bush taught Bill everything he knew. That's why they teamed up. That's how Clinton got the presidency next. And then Bush again to continue, right? With a bigger war because he wanted to impress his daddy. He wanted to top his daddy. And then he said that in an interview. You think my daddy's war was big. Wait till you see my war. And then after him, we had the next degenerate, right? Obama, followed by, like, basically a mentally retarded man. And Trump, who's not even a legal citizen. Trump, who's like Illuminati and God knows what else. Yeah. Good job, America. And this is where I end my little debacle. See? Look. Freak demon, freak demon, freak demon, freak demon. Remember this guy? A vocal supporter of his country's right to a peaceful nuclear program. Remember what happened to him? He said Israel must be wiped off the map, while Israel asked Bush to back the bombing of nuclear sites in Iran. The Lebanon War began, and Israel was again fighting Hezbollah, which was heavily backed by Iran. Bush called for uprisings and regime change in Iran. Well, of course he did. He announced this idea of regime change and really put it on notice. So at the time when the U.S. was in Afghanistan, when the U.S. was in Iraq, it looked very much as though the U.S. was poised to go for the Iran regime. And that was a very low point in their relationship. That hardened political thinking in Iran. Oh my gosh, so serious. He's probably trying to hold in a fart. Okay. Obama pursued diplomacy with Iran. Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was agreed upon by the UN Security Council, China, France, Russia, the UK, and the US, plus Germany, with conditions including robust monitoring and development of only basic nuclear infrastructure and a promise by Iran to never seek or obtain nuclear weapons. Netanyahu and Obama had a very strained relationship. Iran supported the regimes in Syria and continued to support Hezbollah. Obama was hailed as the father of the nuclear deal, as the one who had, and he, of course, was bombing everyone, everywhere, with his drones. All right. The U.S. and Iran are sworn enemies. Who's going to end the wars? Remember that, you guys? Trump was going to end the wars. Oh, well, maybe he'll end this one that he started by bombing a girls' elementary school and killing 170 little girls. He withdrew from Obama's JCPOA with Iran, saying it was defective at its core. This was celebrated by Netanyahu and angered Iran's president. Iran announced it would resume nuclear research and development, but did not explicitly say it would pursue nuclear weapons. Trump said he was not looking for war, but threatened obliteration like you've never seen before. Oh my gosh, mentally disabled. Yeah, they got that right. Trump also expanded sanctions and ordered the killing of Iranian general Soleimani by drone strike. Iran issued arrest warrants for Trump and other officials on murder and terrorism charges. Israel admits to bombing Iranian targets in Syria. Iranian politicians chant anti-American and anti-Israeli slogans, protest against the U.S. killing of Iranian general. January 5th, 2020. Biden. Diplomacy with Iran had deteriorated. Not much changes until October 7, 2023. Biden did attempt to revive the JCPOA initially agreed upon under Obama, but talks stalled, and then Biden furthered sanctions. And then October 7 happened. Palestinian group Hamas launched a terror attack, allegedly inside Israel, and even though Israel had gotten the intel days ahead and knew about it, they allowed it to happen anyway. Possibly even, adding bombs just to make sure it happened, kind of like the U.S. did. The U.S. government actually provided the bombs that they detonated in the World Trade Center. So anyway, Almost immediately, Israel invaded Gaza and began a war that has killed tens of thousands of civilians. Biden spent at least $17.9 billion on additional military aid to Israel. So yes, America is responsible for the genocide in Gaza. And that's why so many people were protesting and wearing the Palestinian scarf. Makes sense now, right? A UN Special Committee report handed down in November 24 concluded Israel's warfare tactics in Gaza were consistent with the characteristics of genocide and that the government was using starvation as a weapon. They murder children as part of their culture. It makes them happy when children die because they believe it will give them more power from their fake God. It's sick. But that's what the Zionists do, and that's what Trump does, because he's one of those Satanists, those Luciferians, psychopaths. Just not sure exactly what he's into. Obviously, he's, he was trained in Kabbalah, so I don't know if he's Ashkenazi or if he's Illuminati or what the heck he is, but he's a genocidal maniac nonetheless. So that kind of brings us up to today, right? Iran began launching missiles at Israel in response to the killings of Hezbollah and Hamas leaders, which was followed by Israel attacking Iran. Israel also bombed Lebanon. Why not? While you're at it, right? Where the Iran-backed Hezbollah continued to operate. The second Trump presidency is less than 6 months old, but the U.S.-Iran-Israel relationship has further deteriorated. It's ridiculous. The recent U.S. bombing of Iran's nuclear sites as part of a wider Israeli campaign is unprecedented. Trump has since taken to social media, flouting the idea of regime change, but has also suggested the U.S. and Iran will engage in a new round of negotiations, and no one seems to know what will come next. What else is worth knowing? You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the F they're doing, Trump told White House reporters about Iran and Israel. And yeah, he's frustrated when people don't do what he tells them, right? Iran's supreme leader has declared the Islamic Republic delivered a hard slap to America's face with a retaliatory missile attack on a U.S. military base in Qatar, and has warned the U.S. and Israel against attacking it again. And of course, we know now that Trump murdered Iran's supreme leader. So, if you look at history, it's always inconsistent. It's flip-flopped based on its own interest, based on its access to oil, based on its access to wealth in the region, and its support to Israel. The United States is not looking at what's going to happen in 20 years in Iran and Iraq and Lebanon. We are really in the realm of lawlessness, and I'm really, really concerned of what's going to happen next. And I was too, friend. So I did some more digging and discovered that this isn't just about oil. Why Iranians are rejecting Islam and embracing Christianity. April 14th, 2025. Churches burned to the ground. Pastors executed in public squares. Families forced to renounce their faith or face the sword. Across the world, Christianity is under attack. Despite the persecution, despite the bloodshed, despite the silence of the world leaders, Christianity is not dying. In fact, in some of the most hostile places on earth, it's thriving. One of these places may surprise many. Iran. The last 14 presidents barely scratches the surface of this epic story.